I want you to just close your eyes for a second.
Okay.
And I want you to travel back in time with me to April 2020.
Oh, man.
I know, right? It's not a place anyone really wants to revisit.
Not at all.
The psychological weight of that month alone is just staggering. But really try to put yourself there in that specific mindset. The entire world is locking down.
Yeah, it was completely surreal.
Exactly. The COVID-19 pandemic is sweeping across the globe at this terrifying speed. Borders are slamming shut, international flights are grounded, and grocery store shelves are suddenly emptying out.
Right. People were buying up all the toilet paper.
Yes. And there's just this overwhelming, suffocating sense of global panic. Everyone you know is retreating into their homes, locking the doors, literally scrubbing their groceries, and just hoping for the best.
It was a very dark, very scary time.
But imagine, right in the midst of all that mounting chaos, as the walls of the world are basically closing in, you are offered a literal escape hatch.
The way out.
Exactly. Instead of your living room, instead of the sirens outside your window, you get to board a luxury cruise ship.
Wow.
And not just any ship, and certainly not to any densely populated destination. You are heading to the most isolated, pristine, untouched place on the face of the earth. You're going to Antarctica.
It sounds like the ultimate sanctuary. I mean, when you consider the sheer panic characterizing human behavior globally at that exact moment.
Oh, yeah.
Stepping onto a ship headed for the ice feels like stepping into a literal bubble of safety.
Totally.
You are physically detaching yourself from a collapsing world.
It sounds perfect. It sounds almost too good to be true.
Right.
And that is exactly what the passengers of the MV Hondius thought when they set sail from Ushuaia.
Ushuaia, Argentina.
Yep, leaving the southern tip of the South American continent behind on April 1st, 2020. But today, we are going inside that specific voyage.
It's an incredible story.
It really is. We have a massive stack of sources detailing the harrowing, unbelievable journey of the Hondius. And our mission in this deep dive is to figure out the mechanics of how a dream journey-like, a literal escape from a global pandemic filled with the promise of glaciers and penguins, transformed into a floating nightmare.
Yeah, it's a stark contrast.
We are going to look at the timeline, obviously. But more importantly, we're going to examine the unique psychology of being isolated at sea, the intense logistics of maritime emergencies, and the terrifying biology of the specific, highly lethal virus that turned this luxury liner into a floating quarantine zone.
Because the threat they encountered was not the one the rest of the world was hiding from.
Yeah.
It was something entirely different. And when you place that specific biological threat into the context of a modern cruise ship, the mechanisms of disaster become potentially even more terrifying than the pandemic they were running away from.
Okay, let's unpack this, but let's do it by looking at the architecture of the situation before the crisis even hits.
Good idea.
To really grasp the horror of the breakdown, we need to understand the physical and psychological baseline of the people stepping onto that ship. We are looking at the MV Hondius, which is a luxury vessel specifically engineered for polar exploration.
Right, it's built for the ice.
Exactly. And on April 1st, 2020, this ship pushes away from the dock. The passenger list is this diverse, international group of affluent, adventurous people.
And they're ready for the trip of a lifetime.
Yeah, their itinerary is the South Atlantic, heading down into Antarctic waters. They are geared up for giant icebergs, whales, penguins, the whole deal.
And we really have to analyze the psychological state of those passengers as the ship leaves port. They are acutely aware of what is happening globally with COVID-19. They've likely barely made it to Argentina before borders began to lock down.
Oh, absolutely. The stress of just getting to the boat must have been insane.
Exactly. So when the gangway is pulled up and the engines engage, the relief must have been palpable. The source material emphasizes this incredibly cheerful initial atmosphere.
Yeah.
People are out on the decks, taking photos of the snowy mountains, forming fast friendships at the buffet. They are finally exhaling.
I keep visualizing the ship as this heavily fortified sanctuary, you know, like a golden lifeboat.
A golden lifeboat. That's a perfect way to put it.
The rest of the world is drowning in bad news and invisible viral threats, and these people must have felt invincible. They are sailing into a pristine wilderness where there are no cities, no crowds, and, logically, no disease.
Right.
But I want to push on that idea of invincibility. how does an environment like a luxury cruise ship actually alter human behavior and threat detection?
Well, that brings us to the psychology of vacation mode,
Okay.
specifically within the highly curated environment of luxury travel.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, an environment that is entirely designed for your leisure, your comfort, and your entertainment creates a very powerful, yet completely false sense of invulnerability.
Interesting.
Every meal is prepared for you. The temperature is perfectly regulated. Every need is anticipated by the crew.
Right. You don't have to lift a finger.
Exactly. You are completely shielded from the elements. This curated environment lulls the human brain into dropping its evolutionary defensive mechanisms.
Wow. So you let your guard down completely.
Yes. When you are on a ship like the Hondius, surrounded by highly trained hospitality staff and breathtaking scenery, your psychological threat detection systems basically power down.
You stop looking for exits. You stop worrying about who is coughing near you because you assume the environment has already been, sanitized and secured by the people in charge.
Precisely. The baseline assumption is safety. The timeline is crucial here too.
Right. It's early April.
Yes, they are cheerful. They are operating under the absolute belief that they have outrun the danger.
Yeah.
They're completely unaware that the threat hasn't been outrun at all.
Well, let's talk about the physical environment itself, because even before things go wrong, a cruise ship is a very strange ecosystem.
It really is.
I look at these massive ships, and I don't just see a floating hotel. I see a sealed container.
From a biological and sociological perspective, a modern cruise ship operates essentially as a closed-loop bioreactor.
A bioreactor? That sounds terrifying.
It is, under the wrong conditions. You have a few hundred people sharing the exact same recirculated air through the HVAC systems.
Oh, right.
They are touching the exact same handrails, sitting at the exact same tables in the dining halls, walking down the same tightly packed corridors.
And in a normal, healthy situation, it functions as this tight-knit community.
Exactly. But in a pathogenic situation, those very systems, the ones designed to keep the freezing Antarctic air out and the warm, comfortable air circulating, become optimized for viral distribution.
Oh, wow.
Once you are out in the open ocean, you cannot just open a window to ventilate the space. You are fundamentally trapped within that highly efficient circulatory system.
So we have this closed-loop system filled with people whose threat detection is turned off, floating away from civilization.
Yes.
And the transition from paradise to nightmare doesn't happen with an explosion or a dramatic harm. It happens in the most mundane way possible.
As these things often do.
Yeah. A few days into the trip, one of the passengers falls ill.
Which is incredibly common on any long voyage.
Right. People get sick on vacation all the time.
All the time.
The symptoms described in our sources are fever, body pain, and extreme weakness. And I'm looking at this timeline, and I'm genuinely trying to understand the medical response here. The doctors on board and the passengers themselves assume it is just the normal flu, or perhaps travel exhaustion.
Right.
And look, I'm trying not to judge them with the benefit of hindsight.
Of course.
But if I'm on a ship during a global pandemic and someone gets a fever, how does a medical team look at that and say, it's just exhaustion?
It's a fair question.
How do they differentiate between someone who pushed themselves too hard on a long travel day and the first domino of a lethal outbreak?
Because they are falling victim to the ultimate diagnostic trap in isolated medicine.
Which is?
It's driven heavily by statistical probability and normalcy bias. A ship's infirmary is not an intensive care unit. It is essentially a well-stocked primary care clinic. They are set up to handle the statistically probable events.
Like seasickness.
Exactly. Seasickness, minor slip and fall injuries, mild respiratory infections, gastroenteritis, early symptoms of highly lethal, rare viruses almost always mimic incredibly common, benign illnesses.
Oh, I see.
A fever, body aches, lethargy. It could be a mild stomach bug, it could be the flu, or it could simply be the physiological crash that happens after navigating 30 hours of stressful international air travel to reach the southern tip of Argentina.
That makes total sense.
Medical professionals are trained to hear hoofbeats and think horses, not zebras.
Right. They look for the obvious answer.
Yes. They don't immediately jump to the conclusion of a lethal pathogen because, statistically, it is almost never a lethal pathogen.
But the calculus changes. The source notes that the passenger's condition worsened incredibly fast.
Yes.
This wasn't a lingering, annoying cough. It was a rapid, aggressive physiological decline that standard infirmary interventions just couldn't touch.
The velocity of the illness is the crucial diagnostic indicator here.
The velocity.
Right. When a patient with a presumed mild viral infection suddenly begins crashing, displaying signs of systemic failure, the medical team realizes they are entirely out of their depth.
Wow.
But by the time that velocity is apparent, the critical window for containment has often already closed.
And that aggressive decline culminates on April 11th. 10 days after they set sail, full of hope, the first passenger dies.
It's tragic.
And I have to imagine that a death on a cruise ship, not a peaceful passing of old age, but a sudden, violent, unexplained viral death, completely fractures the reality of everyone on board.
It shatters what sociologists would call the social contract of the cruise.
This social contract.
Yeah. The implicit agreement everyone makes when they pay for that ticket is, we are here to relax, the environment is controlled, the crew will protect us, and we will all return home safely.
Right. I paid you to keep me safe.
Exactly. An unexplained death from an aggressive, invisible illness destroys that illusion of safety instantly. The structural integrity of their sanctuary is breached.
The sources describe the immediate shift in the atmosphere, and it sounds chilling.
Very much so.
You have passengers whispering to each other in the hallways and the dining areas. Think about how the geometry of the ship feels in that moment.
How so?
Well, the dining room, with its beautiful table settings and panoramic ocean views, suddenly morphs into a zone of immense danger. The buffet tongs become weapons.
That's a great way to put it.
You're looking at the person at the next table who you were just sharing drinks with a week ago and wondering, are they carrying it? Am I carrying it?
The environment transitions completely.
Yeah.
It goes from a space of communal joy and shared experience to an environment of intense suspicion, paranoia, and self-preservation.
It must have been exhausting.
And consider the burden placed on the crew in this exact moment.
Oh, man, I hadn't even thought about the crew yet.
These are hospitality workers, sailors, and culinary staff. Suddenly, they are thrust into the impossible role of maintaining a facade of absolute calm while acute terror mounts.
I can't even imagine. They still have to serve the meals. They still have to turn down the beds, all while knowing a passenger has just died under mysterious circumstances right down the hall.
That facade of calm shatters completely when the mystery deepens.
Right.
With one death confirmed, the fact that they are on a ship, which initially seemed like their greatest asset, now becomes a massive, terrifying logistical and medical liability.
Because it's no longer just one isolated incident.
Exactly. Because a second passenger falls seriously ill.
And we need to look at the clinical presentation of this second patient because the symptoms are escalating beyond vague flu-like indicators.
What were the symptoms?
It is no longer just fever and weakness. Now the medical team is observing severe stomach pain, vomiting, and crucially significant difficulty breathing.
Respiratory distress.
So the doctors are staring at these escalating symptoms, and they realize their onboard infirmary, which, as you said, is basically a glorified first aid clinic, is completely unequipped to handle respiratory failure.
They don't have ICU ventilators.
Right. They don't have a team of pulmonologists. That lack of equipment forces a terrifying realization. They have to get her off the ship immediately.
Which is easier said than done.
Way easier said than done, because that puts them up against the geography of the South Atlantic.
The sheer physics and geography of this crisis cannot be overstated. The South Atlantic is one of the most remote, punishing bodies of water on the planet.
Yeah, it's not like sailing around the Caribbean.
Not at all. There are no quick helicopter rides to a level 1 trauma center. Coordinating a medical evacuation, a medevac in this environment, is a profound logistical nightmare.
The evacuation is for the wife of the first passenger who died.
Right.
She is now critically ill. And on April 24th, they managed to execute a medical evacuation to the island of St. Helena.
Which is an incredible feat in itself.
It really is. I looked at a map while prepping for this. St. Helena is a tiny volcanic outpost literally in the middle of nowhere between South America and Africa.
It is extremely isolated.
And from there, she has to be flown all the way to Johannesburg, South Africa for emergency treatment. How does an isolated ship even begin to coordinate that kind of movement for a highly infectious, deteriorating patient?
It requires an incredible network of maritime communication and international cooperation. The ship's captain and medical officer have to coordinate with maritime rescue coordination centers.
Over satellite phones, I assume?
Yes. And they have to find a port willing to accept a critically ill patient during a global pandemic, which is a massive hurdle on its own.
Because everyone is terrified of COVID.
Exactly. They have to arrange for specialized medical transport from the port to an airfield and then secure a medevac flight capable of continuous critical care en route to Johannesburg.
That is just so many moving parts.
You are fighting against time, rapidly depleting onboard medical oxygen, and the physical constraints of moving a patient from a pitching vessel to a tender boat or a dock.
In the middle of the ocean.
Right, all while trying to protect the transport crew from an unidentified contagion.
It is a desperate, frantic race against the biology of the virus. But despite that massive, multinational logistical effort, the virus wins.
Yeah.
On April 26th, 2 days after the evacuation to St. Helena, she tragically dies in Johannesburg.
And by late April, that specific event is what causes the panic on the MV Hondius to calcify into genuine terror.
Because they knew.
Yes, because the connection to the first death is undeniable. It is no longer an isolated, tragic anomaly. It is a cluster. It is a pattern of lethal infection.
I want you, listening to this, to truly put yourself in that confined space.
It's hard to even fathom.
Imagine you are walking the deck, staring out at the endless freezing ocean. You hear that a fellow passenger was evacuated, which is terrifying enough, but you hold onto the hope of modern medicine.
Right, you think, okay, she's off the ship, she's going to be fine.
You wait for good news, and instead the captain's voice comes over the intercom, or maybe the rumor just spreads through the dining hall that she didn't make it.
Heartbreaking.
The absolute sinking dread of being stuck on the water thousands of miles from any hospital, knowing that whatever aggressively dismantled the lungs of those two people is trapped inside the metal hull with you.
That is the exact inflection point where the psychological burden shifts from acute anxiety to existential dread. The illusion of the sanctuary isn't just broken, it is actively weaponized against them.
So you have a locked room mystery with a rising body count, and it demands an answer.
Yes.
The blood samples make it to labs, the World Health Organization gets involved, and the diagnosis finally comes back.
A moment of truth.
But it's not COVID-19.
No.
It is Hantavirus, specifically the Andes strain of Hantavirus.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I was reading this, and I actually stopped and reread the paragraph 3 times.
I don't blame you.
I'm genuinely confused by the mechanism here. So, what does this all mean? When I hear Hantavirus, I think of sweeping out dusty cabins and mice.
That's the classic association.
Right. My only reference point is rural settings. Someone in a dusty, abandoned barn in the American Southwest, stirring up mouse droppings in the dust and inhaling the particles.
Exactly.
I associate it entirely with rodents. There are no mice running around the carving station of a luxury polar cruiser.
Hopefully not.
How does a rodent virus become a human-to-human threat on a luxury cruise ship?
Your confusion is exactly why this baffled the initial medical responders.
Okay, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
To understand this, we have to deeply examine the virology of this specific pathogen. You are absolutely correct about the standard transmission vector. Most hantaviruses globally are zoonotic.
Meaning they jump from animals?
Yes. They jump from animals, typically specific species of rodents, to humans. The transmission occurs when humans inhale aerosolized particles from infected rodent urine, droppings, or saliva. So logically, the very first assumption upon hearing hantavirus on a ship is to ask, has the ship's food supply been compromised by a massive rodent infestation?
Exactly. Did rats get into the cargo hold in Argentina and contaminate the flour?
But the WHO investigation, looking at the epidemiology of the outbreak, pointed in a completely different direction.
Okay.
They suspected, and the timeline supports this, that the initial patients had contracted the virus while traveling in rural or semi-rural areas of South America before they ever boarded the ship in Ushuaia.
Oh, wow. So the ship's environment itself wasn't the source of the initial infection at all.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the origin point was external.
Wow.
The passengers themselves, unwittingly carrying the incubating virus in their own bodies, brought the danger past the gangway and into the sanctuary.
That is wild.
But your previous point is the critical one. Even if a passenger caught it from a rodent in an Argentine cabin a week prior, how is it spreading to other passengers on the ship?
Right, because I thought you couldn't pass it on.
As you noted, standard hantavirus is a dead end in humans. You get it from environmental dust. You do not get it from sitting across from someone at dinner.
Right. If I have standard hantavirus, I can't cough on you and give it to you.
And that brings us to the terrifying biological anomaly of the Andes strain.
Yeah.
Unlike almost every other hantavirus in the world, the Andes strain, which is endemic primarily to Argentina and Chile, has a unique, highly dangerous evolutionary capability.
Which is?
It can spread from human to human.
Through close contact, through sharing the recirculated air we talked about.
Yes. The epidemiological data on the Andes strain shows sustained person-to-person transmission, likely through infectious droplets or close personal contact.
That is terrifying.
And that single biological detail, that specific mutation or evolutionary trait of the Andes strain, is the linchpin of this entire catastrophic narrative.
Because if it was a normal strain...
Exactly. If the initial passenger had contracted any other strain of hantavirus, the tragedy would have been strictly limited to that single individual. There would have been no outbreak.
Wow.
But because it was the Andes strain, capable of human-to-human transmission, the MV Hondius was transformed overnight from a luxury liner into an active, highly efficient viral incubator.
The tragic irony of this is just staggering to me.
It's unbelievable.
Think about the motivation of the people on board. These people were actively fleeing the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right.
They were terrified of a highly transmissible airborne respiratory virus that was shutting down the world. And to escape it, they locked themselves in a highly sealed steel box in the middle of the freezing ocean and ended up sharing recirculated air with a completely different, exponentially more lethal, human-to-human transmissible virus.
They attempted to outmaneuver one invisible enemy, and in doing so, they trapped themselves in an environment where escape from a much rarer, highly aggressive pathogen was physically impossible.
And it's way more lethal than COVID, right?
Oh, absolutely. The mortality rate for hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, which the Andes strain causes, can hover around 35 to 40%.
40%, that is, wow.
It is a profoundly dangerous pathogen characterized by rapidly progressing pulmonary edema. Essentially, the capillaries in the lungs begin to leak fluid, causing the patient to drown from the inside.
Which perfectly explains the severe respiratory distress of the second passenger.
Precisely.
So now, the medical team and the captain have a name for the monster. It's the Andes strain. But simply identifying the virus doesn't offer a therapeutic cure.
No, it doesn't.
They don't have a magic antiviral pill to distribute. Knowing the name just dictates the new draconian rules of daily survival. We enter the phase of the floating quarantine.
And this is where the sociology of the ship breaks down completely and rebuilds itself around fear.
The source details a massive behavioral shift among the passengers.
Imagine.
Gone are the days of buffet breakfasts and whale watching on the observation deck. Passengers are retreating and locking themselves inside their small cabins.
Hiding away.
Yeah, they are actively avoiding all public places. People are improvising masks. They are obsessively checking their own temperatures.
Which is a natural response.
It's like every time someone clears their throat, every minor muscle ache from sleeping poorly is suddenly perceived as a potential death sentence.
Consider the psychological toll of that specific type of isolation.
It must have been brutal.
When you are confined to a cruise ship cabin, which, even on a luxury vessel, is a relatively small space, your entire physical world shrinks to a few hundred square feet.
Yeah, you're literally just staring at the walls.
And into that physical void, paranoia and rumors rush in to fill the space. The text explicitly mentions rumors spreading rapidly.
Of course they did.
This is a classic sociological response to an information vacuum during a crisis. Without transparent, continuous, and reassuring information, the human mind immediately catastrophizes.
We always imagine the worst-case scenario.
Exactly. You have a ship full of people suffering from acute insomnia, paralyzed by the fear of their own bodies.
Just lying awake in bed.
They are constantly checking their phones, desperately trying to pull in news from the outside world, calling their families thousands of miles away, just trying to maintain some shred of hope while staring at those cabin walls.
I keep trying to find the right way to describe this. It is like being trapped in a haunted house, where you can't just walk out the front door and the ghost is in the air you're breathing.
That's a haunting analogy, but it's accurate.
You are trapped with the entity. But while the passengers have the luxury of locking themselves in their cabins and hiding, we have to look at the crew. And this is where the logistics of survival become incredibly fraught.
The crew cannot hide.
They can't.
This raises an important question about duty and safety. The operational demands of a maritime vessel do not cease because of a biological threat.
Right. You can't just turn off the engines and wait it out.
Exactly. The ship must be navigated, the engine rooms must be continuously monitored, the sanitation systems have to be maintained.
Things have to keep running.
And, most critically for the passengers, food must be prepared and delivered.
Oh man, room service during an outbreak.
The crew is suddenly working Grueling, impossibly long hours. They are trying to maintain structural order, they're trying to prevent mass panic, all while harboring the exact same mortal fear for their own lives.
They must have been terrified.
They know exactly how the virus transmits. Yet, every single time a steward walks down a potentially contaminated hallway to deliver a tray of food to a cabin, they're exposing themselves to the very pathogen that just killed 2 people.
Just to bring someone a sandwich.
The psychological resilience required to perform hospitality duties under those conditions is immense.
And the pressure cooker keeps building. Because the containment efforts aren't perfectly successful. On May 2, a 3rd passenger dies.
It just keeps escalating.
The numbers are piling up in a very small population. According to the final WHO reports, there were 7 confirmed cases of hantavirus linked to the ship and 2 additional suspected cases.
That's a significant cluster.
So you have a highly lethal virus actively transmitting, actively killing people in a confined space. The most obvious instinctual solution is get to land.
Right. Find a port.
Steer the ship to the nearest port, get everyone off the boat, and get them into proper hospitals.
Which brings us face to face with the geopolitical paralysis that defined the early months of 2020.
Yeah, nobody wanted visitors.
Getting to land is a physical maneuver. Being allowed to dock is a complex political negotiation.
The Hondius travels north, moving out of the extreme southern waters, heading toward Africa, desperately looking for a port. But nobody wants to let them in.
To understand why, you have to look at the macro-political context of that exact moment.
Take us back there.
It is late April, bleeding into early May of 2020. The entire global infrastructure is buckling under the weight of COVID-19.
Hospitals are overflowing.
Exactly. Furthermore, cruise ships had already become international pariahs.
Oh, right, the Diamond Princess.
Yes. Events like the outbreak on the Diamond Princess earlier that year had cemented the image of cruise ships as floating plague incubators in the minds of the public and politicians alike.
People were terrified of them.
So imagine you are a port authority or a health minister. You receive a desperate hail from a cruise ship.
Okay.
Not only do they have an active outbreak of sick passengers, but the pathogen isn't even the one you are currently fighting.
Right.
It is a completely different, highly lethal exotic virus.
If I'm a local governor fighting a COVID surge in my hospitals, the absolute last thing I'm going to do is authorize a ship carrying human-to-human transmissible hantavirus to offload passengers into my city.
You'd be risking a second, completely different outbreak.
The political risk is astronomical.
Exactly. International maritime law has provisions for aiding vessels in distress, but the mechanics of biosecurity during a pandemic override standard protocol.
Sovereignty rules.
Sovereignty dictates who can cross a border. So the MV Hondius essentially becomes a ghost ship.
A ghost ship just floating out there.
Port authorities are debating. International health ministries are locked in endless bureaucratic arguments over quarantine jurisdictions. And meanwhile, the people trapped on board are just drifting on the ocean,
Waiting for someone to save them.
living in profound hour-by-hour uncertainty, watching the death toll rise.
But a ship cannot sustain itself at sea forever. Fuel runs low, provisions run out, and the medical crisis demands intervention.
They eventually have to find a pathway back to civilization.
The narrative shifts from just trying to survive the ocean to the incredibly complex, heavily guarded, almost militaristic process of stepping foot on dry land.
The logistics transition from maritime survival to a massive, highly secure repatriation operation.
On May 3, they finally achieve a breakthrough. They arrive at Cape Verde, an island nation off the coast of West Africa.
Finally, a port.
But this is not a standard docking where people wave from the balconies and walk down the stairs to buy souvenirs.
Oh, definitely not.
Strict, draconian safety rules are implemented the moment they approach. Medical teams are monitoring the situation. The crew handling the port logistics are now operating in full protective clothing.
Hazmat gear.
It is extreme social distancing. The ship and everyone on it are treated as acute biological hazards.
Because from the perspective of the port authorities and global health monitors, they absolutely are biological hazards.
Right.
Cape Verde provided a critical staging ground. It offered a moment to stabilize the ship, perhaps restock essential medical supplies and provisions, and conduct medical assessments.
It's going to regroup.
But it was not the final destination. The passengers still needed to get home.
The ship pushes on, continuing its journey north, and finally, on May 10th, the MV Hondius reaches a port in Tenerife, in Spain's Canary Islands.
A major European port.
I try to imagine the sheer exhausting relief of seeing that port. Our sources explicitly state that for many of the passengers, reaching land felt like finally waking up from a nightmare.
The psychological release at that moment must have been overwhelming.
Just seeing solid ground.
Solid ground represents a return to the known world. It represents robust medical infrastructure, the presence of governmental authority, and ultimately a concrete pathway home to their families.
But the reality of the danger was far from over. They couldn't just grab their expensive suitcases, walk down the gangway, hail a taxi to the Tenerife airport, and fly commercial.
Absolutely not. That would be a biosecurity disaster.
Right. The Spanish government and the home countries of the passengers were terrified that these infected or potentially incubating travelers might spark a secondary outbreak of the Andes strain on land.
Which is a very valid fear.
So health officials had to organize and execute these incredibly strict, heavily monitored special evacuation plans.
The sheer complexity of that logistical operation is staggering.
It sounds like a nightmare to plan.
You are attempting to repatriate over 90 potentially exposed individuals to various different countries across the globe, requiring them to transit through international airspace and airports without ever breaching strict quarantine protocols.
Like threading a needle.
It requires a level of coordination akin to a military operation, involving international health ministries, aviation authorities, local police to secure the transport corridors, and specialized biosecure transport units.
The visual imagery described in the source material for this final evacuation is just wild.
It's striking.
I want you to think about the incredible visual contrast from the beginning of this deep dive. This journey started with affluent travelers boarding a beautiful luxury liner in their high-end, colorful winter gear.
Ready for vacation.
They were holding expensive cameras, taking smiling selfies with glaciers in the background, clinking champagne glasses in the dining room, celebrating their escape.
The golden lifeboat.
And how does it end? It ends with them walking down a metal gangway in Tenerife on May 10th. Over 90 passengers leaving the ship one by one, and they are wearing blue medical gowns, face masks, latex gloves, and protective surgical caps.
Stripped entirely of their individuality, their status, and their comfort.
Yes. It looks like a scene pulled straight out of a Hollywood contagion thriller. The luxury vacation, the ultimate escape from the pandemic, literally ended in hazmat suits.
It is the perfect visual encapsulation of the total inversion of their reality.
Totally inverted.
The idyllic journey they planned and the horrific journey they actually survived were two completely incompatible realities occupying the exact same physical space.
So as we pull all these disparate threads together, the virology, the maritime logistics, the psychology of isolation, the story of the MV Hondius reveals itself to be so much more than just a canceled vacation or a travel nightmare.
It's a profound case study.
It was an absolutely grueling 40-day test of human endurance. It was defined by intense fear, severe medical mystery, horrific sickness, and tragic loss.
Yes, it was.
But ultimately, it is also a story of endurance and survival for those who finally walked down that gangway in Tenerife and made it home.
It serves as a remarkable, albeit tragic, case study in how rapidly the illusion of safety can evaporate and how incredibly fragile our highly engineered controlled environments truly are when introduced to a novel biological variable.
We think we're so safe.
But as we analyze the entirety of this event, there's a final lingering thought that emerges from the source material that I think is essential to confront.
What is the main takeaway you were looking at?
It goes all the way back to the WHO's conclusion regarding the very origin of the outbreak.
Okay, right.
The Andes strain of the Hantavirus wasn't waiting for them on the ship.
It wasn't in the walls.
No, and it wasn't hidden in the pristine ice of Antarctica. The passengers carried the virus onto the ship from South America before they ever set sail.
They brought it with them.
They inadvertently packed it alongside their cold weather gear. And this fundamental fact challenges a very modern, deeply human concept,
which is
the idea of escaping danger. We constantly attempt to build fortresses, we construct bunkers, we board luxury ships, we retreat to isolated cabins in the woods, operating under the assumption that if we just travel far enough or build the walls thick enough, we can shut the door on the chaos of the world.
But we can't.
But if we carry the unseen seeds of the disaster within our own bodies into our supposedly impenetrable safe havens,
Right.
Is true isolation ever actually possible? When we frantically try to run away from a crisis in a deeply interconnected, globalized world, we might simply be locking ourselves in a very small room with a completely different disaster.
That is an incredibly haunting thought to leave on. The realization that you cannot outrun something you are carrying with you.
It's a heavy thought.
I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It is a heavy, intense story, but a vitally important reminder of the complex, invisible biological threads that connect us all, regardless of how isolated we think we are. Keep questioning the world around you, keep looking beneath the surface of the stories you hear, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.